So I've learned that life learning brings not only just progress, but it brings peace when you find lessons. So my struggles, I've always tried to make them my strengths. So in
Right.
that case,
Right.
I was struggling in writing. So guess what I'm doing now? I'm in academics. I do research
Love it.
and writing all day
Love it.
long.
Yeah.
And then, my first debut fiction novel came out in February. I've got a second book coming out in end of December, January. And, so anybody, if there's a struggle out there, it doesn't mean you can't overcome it. It means you
Right.
have to find new ways to do
Yeah.
things.
Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, where we strive to help our listeners live their best, audacious lives ever. It's always a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate all of you for taking the time out of your day to join us and embark on this journey towards audacious living. Today we have a special guest whose story perfectly embodies the essence of audacious living. Rhonda Parker's journey from a small town in Indiana to becoming a published author is a testament to the power of resilience, self-discovery, and authenticity. Just as, the caterpillar, goes through a process of resilience and self-discovery and authenticity to emerge as a beautiful butterfly, Rhonda's challenges and growth have shaped her into an inspiring author that she is today. We're going to hear from Rhonda as her story. She shares her insights on overcoming struggles, finding strength and vulnerability, and really living life to the fullest, which is what we're all about here on this podcast. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with Rhonda. Enjoy. Hey, Rhonda, thank you for being here on the Audacious Living Podcast. It's a pleasure to make acquaintances like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for having me. What a great day. It's a Friday. We're all ready to get prepared for the weekend.
Right.
And let's have a great, engaging conversation that
Sure.
hopefully will enlighten everybody out there.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm just so appreciative and honored to be able to spend time with so many inspiring and engaging individuals, and the fact that people like the individuals have a message to share to the rest of the world and impact others is a marvelous thing. And so I appreciate this time. And you very much are, as a writer, you impact and inspire individuals as well. And so maybe as a starting point, because obviously we've all had a journey to get where we are. Maybe as a starting point, you can fill us in as to what got you up into this point.
Sure, I'll be glad to. My name is Rhonda Parker Taylor, and I'm from Indianapolis, or the Indianapolis area now, but I grew up in a small town in the suburbs of Indianapolis, which is called Noblesville. Hey, Noblesville. And, it was a different journey than a lot of people because, so many people grow up in the city. In the small town, everybody. You know when you come in as a child by the bell being rang, not by the street lights. So,
Right.
and then everybody runs in for dinner, and you're grown to enjoy the outdoors. And so my experience is a little different than some. I went to a private Christian high school too, actually from pre-kindergarten to my high school years. So it was very small there too. There was only 50 in my graduating class.
Yeah.
So I didn't really know what my journey was supposed to be.
Right.
I dreamed and would read books and stuff of the big city, and dreamed of going to the big city. And that's the very first thing I did growing up, is I picked a college that was in fashion merchandising,
Okay.
and just outside of Dallas, Texas. How much further can a small town girl go than Dallas? So I went there and got my associates, then my bachelor's later, and my master's and my doctorate. But I would have been one of those people would say, oh, you're academically strong. I always struggled. So for those out there that have children, or maybe they're struggling themselves, or maybe considering going back to college, pick what works for you. And I think that's my message in everything I do is we're not cookie cutters of each other. It would be a very boring life out there if we were all cookie cutters.
Yes.
So for me, I struggled. It took a teacher that put me under her wing so I could graduate. One of the weaknesses was writing in English. And some of the concepts of the victory drill books and the McGuffey readers and all the things, they kind of escaped me as a younger learner. So I've learned that life learning brings not only just progress, but it brings peace when you find lessons. So my struggles, I always try to make them my strengths. So in that case, I was struggling in writing. So guess what I'm doing now? I'm in academics. I do research and writing all day long. And then, my first debut fiction novel came out in February. I've got a second book coming out in end of December, January. And, so anybody, if there's a struggle out there, it doesn't mean you can't overcome it. It means you have to find new ways to do things. So I try to learn from that. And I try to preach it, or however you want to say, or mentor it, or consult it, that everybody has challenges. We could all be diagnosed with a learning disability almost of some sort.
Sure. Well, I mean, look, at the end of the day, learning disabilities, it was something that we very recently, if you look at it, the grand scheme, the only recently started to understand better. And I mean, even myself, I've got a daughter on the autism spectrum, and it wasn't only, but up to that point, I've never had any interaction or knew any child or anyone that anything about autism. Well, it's the spectrum is broad, and people can be slotted anywhere in that spectrum, whether it's very mild or very severe. And so then you start to reflect. And when I was growing up, there was this young boy, and he was always in the corner because he was labeled bad and he wasn't learning and he wasn't paying attention. Maybe there was something going on with him that just wasn't diagnosed because the schools and the teachers weren't equipped, right? So I think that's a really, really, really significant point. And I do love the point you raised about what works for you, because it really speaks to our individual authenticity. And as much as we want to, slot people, especially when you get advice from people, well, do this because this is what I did. And if you do the exact same thing, you'll be, well, no, that
doesn't work like that.
For you, right? No, it doesn't, right? And so I think that's a really, really strong point.
And then know what you're going through, because sometimes when you're going through stresses, that impacts what you're going to be able to accomplish, whether it be on a day, or whether it be a week or a month, whatever the duration of that adversity makes a big difference. So those are things that I love to highlight with the people I coach and that I work with is don't define yourself by the limitations. Define them by what your focus and your lessons and your skills are, and what skills you need to progress. And for me, it could be, it's been different things at different seasons.
Yes.
Depending on what I'm going through, how I feel, where I am in my life. So I practice every 3 to 5 years going back through all my goals and all my life and saying, okay, what am I doing right? And what am I doing wrong? Like right now I'm trying to focus on my personal family relationships. And because so much of me has been focused on my work that it's like, okay, wait a minute. I've been asking my family to put themselves on hold a little bit. What am I doing to feed back into them?
Right. And I think it really is a great approach to taking an honest look at yourself and reflecting and just being real. I mean, letting down the veil, so to speak, because that isn't easy for people. Sometimes people have to be honest with themselves, and a lot can't do that, right?
Right. And the other thing is when you're reflecting, it's easier for you to take it from yourself than somebody else saying, do you realize you're doing this and you're doing that and you're doing this and you're doing that? Because then you become defensive. So if you do an honest reflection and assessment of self periodically, you can catch many of the pitfalls that you have now, before you get to those points.
Right, right, right. Another I think interesting point around this. When we talk about sort of being honest with ourselves and recognizing though, and sometimes we don't always recognize that life is a progression, and as we move through life, we gain new experiences, learnings. Maybe we read a book and gained some insights. We listen to a podcast and change the direction of our life. Whatever. But we do my point is that there's some form of change, so necessarily where you started isn't necessarily where you'll always be, and so we go
Right.
through that reflection process. It's important to recognize that too.
Exactly, because what you learn from yourself is going to be different than what you learn from others.
Mm,
And you need to have not only an authentic self, but you have to surround yourself with authentic people. Because if a person's just telling you what you want to hear, or isn't honest in their intentions towards you, then you can't set any healthy boundaries.
right.
So you want to lift each other up, but also create these boundaries that are authentic too, that say, hold up, don't have the time for it. Or
Right.
hold up, I've got this to do. Or no, I can't do that. Or yes, I can help you with that. I don't mind reading through it and giving you my opinion.
Right.
Or hey, let me tutor your child because they're not listening. Whatever it might be.
Right.
You learn from others, and you surround yourself with, I'm going to say, your own small community. They say for children you have to have a whole village, right, to raise a child. But guess what? We're all children. Even if you're 60 years old, you have a child inside of yourself. So it
That's
takes,
it.
I'm going to say, it takes a whole village for each one a human being, because
I agree.
we cannot thrive if we're not practicing mindfulness to each other.
Yeah, no, and also exercising grace. I've oftentimes said
Oh,
that if we can exercise a bit more grace in this world, how different things would be, and how more understanding we become, and more tolerant and patient, and loving to one another.
oh yeah, grace is a big one. That is like a comment that my sister and I always use. Give them grace. They're going through this, or give them grace. They don't
Yes.
realize it yet. They haven't gotten to that point. And a lot of that has to do with either maybe your environment that you've grown up
Sure,
in, and you
sure.
don't know what you don't know, and
That's
you're
right.
just following the same patterns, or not listening because you're under some kind of stress. But or maybe we haven't created the resilience and the inner strength yet
Right.
to see what other things might be going. So when we examine ourselves, you have to really examine also our limited beliefs.
Got you.
I
Yep.
tell you, I come from a small town. I came from a small school. When
Yep.
I got into the big pond, it wasn't anything like I thought the world was going to
Sure.
be. So my limitation was limited too,
Sure. Sure.
because I thought everybody was good. I thought everybody had good intentions. And I had to learn from the school of hard knocks that, hey,
Mm,
sometimes you can have false loyalties.
right.
So as you practice your own positivity and stay disciplined for yourself and stay focused, you have to find the lessons and don't repeat the same old
Yeah.
patterns.
Uh,
It's
and
so easy to repeat those patterns.
they certainly are. I oftentimes say that if you go through an experience and you haven't learned the lesson, then you wasted the experience
Oh, definitely.
because you're just doing
Definitely.
the
And
same thing.
I have to admit that I play the game of uncle. I want to repeat the same pattern, and I want to until I get that bash upside the head that says, okay, you've done this before.
Right.
Back up,
Uh,
listen,
what did you
and
learn?
evaluate what you're doing and what is best for all parties involved.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's why I enjoyed the emotional intelligence research that I did during my academic journey because for those that don't know, I wrote the multinational leader in emotional intelligence, and we tested domestic leaders and we tested multinational leaders, and it was presented at the UN Global Compact Committee, which is sustainable businesses and practices and teaching, any organization how they can be sustainable in a worldwide global world.
Right.
And in doing that, we found that all 21 characteristics, of course, the multinational leader had the highest score for emotional intelligence than the domestic leader, except for in one characteristic.
What's that?
Which is self-impression of themselves.
Oh.
The domestic leader thought more of themselves and had less empathy than the multinational leader, which is a whole thing that we can talk about, how our perceptions of the world are formed.
Okay.
And then we lose the ability to have empathy for other human beings.
I see. So we're operating more of a judgment state of mind then.
Right, exactly. So how could you lead a whole organization and not really be able to say, oh, wait a minute, they don't want to go to Ruth Chris for their reward. They need their car fixed.
Right.
Or they're taking an Uber every day, or there's a ton of things, or they're struggling with babysitting, or whatever it might be that the employees are struggling with. Know and have empathy for where they are, because yes, sometimes we put ourselves in bad situations that cost us.
And I think that point you've made about recognizing really it's keying in the needs of the individual, and I think that goes back to the very early point we made that everything doesn't work for everyone. Like things are different, right? And so not only are things are different, our needs are different.
They're different.
And so
exactly.
the type of leader that you described that's required is one that's able to listen, to have empathy, to understand, to exercise compassion. Because if you can do these things, then you can address the needs of the people. By addressing the needs of your people, then you have the ability to lead them better.
That's exactly right. And they'll do better for you. Let's take a perfect example. Let's say there's someone struggling with their performance.
Okay.
And you sit down and talk to them and you find out that there's this huge crisis going on in their life. Whatever it may be. There's a ton of them we could list. It doesn't matter what it is.
Right.
But that is sucking the life out of that employee, and they've been a good employee all their lives. When you find that out, then you create a plan for them still to be successful, and you're clear in your communication with them.
Yes.
You tell them, okay, I get it. This has got to be the hardest struggle, and maybe you have to rearrange their schedule or whatever. But this is what I need you to do for me. Don't put me in a situation where I have to make that judgment call.
Right.
You do what you know what's right as an employee to do, as far as performance, as far as attendance, as far as tardiness, whatever they are, is being impacted. You perform in these areas so I can be a good leader to you and perform in these areas.
Right.
If you take out the fluff and you're just honest, most people will respond. And those that don't, maybe this situation is too overwhelming.
Right.
But then that in advance.
Yes.
If they're and if that's one of the cases, maybe you need to take back some of the duties until they get back on. You create a plan that works for them.
That's right. That's individualized.
That elevates their ability to be a good employee or a good peer, and then celebrate them.
Right.
How many people get their birthday off?
Right. Yeah. Good question. Yeah.
But yet we'll have every holiday in the world for every major group in the world. But why not celebrate your employees instead? Guess what? That's going to cost you less because you don't have everybody off at the same day. Give them their birthday off. Let them celebrate them as an employee.
Yep. No, you're right. And I think it's a really good point. And it's individualized, it's recognizing that person, and it's making them feel special.
Right.
And that oftentimes there's not a huge cost to that either.
No. And, you can do that with your loved ones.
Sure.
Everybody thinks, you got to take them on a large, vacation. Yes, we all like the big gifts. We all like the diamonds. We all like the gold. We all like all the bling and everything else. But how about a box with little Tootsie Roll papers that says 101 ways of why you love that person or like that person. Cost nothing. Schedule in things throughout the year or the month that are things that show your authentic ability to be loving, caring, and living life with the people around you. So many times we're just too busy.
Right. Yeah, no, I like that. I like that a lot. I want to go back to you being a writer, given
Okay.
that your background wouldn't have suggested that in early going, right? That you'd be a writer.
Right.
If you were to, had an opportunity to talk to your younger self and say, "Hey, Rhonda, when you grow up, you are going to be a published author, and here's the things that you're going to do, and here's all the wonderful writings that you're going to share with the world," what would your younger self said?
At first, I wouldn't have believed it. I would have thought that, okay, maybe I would have stayed in fashion. I've done, but why would anybody want to know anything that I wanted to know? And that goes back to most people that like to write or read, like to learn from those readings or be an escape from the world today.
Yes.
So I would say to everybody out there, if you have a story to tell, it's only one page a day. And you have a novel in a year. And that's double space, only 200 words a day, if you just stay disciplined. And I did do my first novel, but it's set for, I don't even know how many years before I published it.
Okay.
And my sister one day said, "What is stopping you? Why aren't you making yourself vulnerable?" And that word kind of jarred me. Well, I don't care about being vulnerable. I don't care what people say. And guess what? Why wasn't I publishing it? I was so busy helping other people and pushing them to be their excellence that I wasn't taking my own advice.
Right.
And so then what I would say is start the journey. See where it takes you. What's it going to hurt? Why would it, my question was, why would anybody care about a small town girl from Indiana? Guess what? It became a bestseller. Guess what? Marilyn Hemingway turned around and endorsed it and wrote the foreword because she's all about life balance and about making sure you're taking care of your mental health. And your first book, guess it was, even though it's a fiction and a courtroom drama, is about a female character that didn't have balance in her life, and therefore she could be exploited throughout the jury process, throughout the whole system. She just wasn't paying attention. And as Meryl read the book, she decided on her own that yes, she would endorse and grace me with that endorsement. And
wow.
Let yourself be vulnerable. Let yourself be that person. Have the freedom to pursue your own passions.
But what made you decide I'm going to write? I think that's a part, Rhonda, that I kind of keep going back to in my mind, where you had all the reason in the world to not write, and you completely justified it, and you got the evidence to back it up and prove it, but you still leaned into something that was a struggle for you.
You're going to laugh at this because it goes back to weaknesses and showing my weakness. I wrote a proposal for a business, and I stayed there, and we implemented it, and everything was fine. But when I handed the memo over, there was a typo / editing grammar problem. I used the wrong insurer.
Okay.
And Ian. I used the wrong one in the memo. And my boss, that's the only thing he said. You used the wrong insurer.
Okay.
And I was like, here we are. I'm a grown adult and I'm still struggling. I need to sit down and get honest with myself about learning the rules and learning. And yes, they got lots of efficiencies out of the proposal, and we implemented it. It didn't hurt me in my work business life. But you know what? It hurt who I was, because I knew I was better than that. And then I was doing twofold there. The second one was one that was still my weakness, even though I thought I had accomplished it. And two, I was working in a community action group that oversaw community blocks in the city.
Right.
And one of the things we did is we watched court cases to make sure that the outcomes were coming out equal. And I saw how unfair the justice system could be.
Mm.
And I saw some of the best judges making some of the smallest mistakes that could cost lives.
Right.
And then I also saw people that were winners and losers in those cases. And no matter which way you thought it should go, everybody still was a loser.
Mm.
And I thought, if I could combine fiction with reality.
Right. Because people like stories, right? People like stories.
Yeah. If I could combine those and strengthen myself, I might have something that will make a difference. So my first fiction novel was Crossroads.
Okay.
And it's a suspense novel based out of Indianapolis in 1982. The main character is Paris Pennington.
Okay.
And she is a workaholic, like many in the Indianapolis or the Midwest area. Core value, work, work, work. You're working from the age of 1. If you're on a farm, you're working in, some capacity. If you're in the steel plants, you're working at some capacity with your parents.
Right.
And, so if the core value is work for her, and she tries to get out of jury duty.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And because she's an executive in downtown Indianapolis, but she can't get out of it. And she ends up being the foreman. And what ends up happening is not only is she involved and she is exposed to things that she'd never seen before and the complications compared to that in the finance world,
Yep.
but she's also sees that, some things aren't fair. And then the judge makes some mistakes too. And meanwhile, what ends up happening to her is her whole world ends up pulled apart.
Mm.
People start getting sick. People start
Right,
dying. You see all these different things coming. But what ends up happening is you also are exploring 3 major emotions that causes crime. Anger.
Mm-hmm.
Anger is cruel. We know that.
Yep.
When you have an anger outburst, what are you going to do? There's some kind of reaction.
Sure.
Fury is overwhelming. And when you're furious, then that's a whole nother animal when someone's furious.
Mm-hmm.
But who can stand before jealousy? And that's a proverb, believe it or not, that comes from Proverbs. Envy makes the bones rot.
Yes.
And when you're envious, especially in this world today where everything's more pretty, more strong, more healthy, more money, your authentic self becomes jealous.
Yes.
And then you don't enjoy your own life.
Right. Well, you take away from what you have and so you don't enjoy your life. You don't appreciate what you have. You don't take stock in what makes you uniquely you. So we all are here on this planet with our own unique gifts and skills and abilities. And if I'm focusing more on what you have and not paying attention to what I have, I'm almost taking myself for granted.
Right. And you don't end up providing self-love because you're so worried about, hey, somebody's got a bigger house or they got the new car this year, and not that you're going to get one 2 years later after in the budget that you put in, or this person's got the spouse that makes food every day or whatever it might be,
right,
that makes you jealous. It can be anything. You're not finding out that really you don't want that big house because you don't want to have to keep it clean. And you're not looking at the fact that, hey, you really like the cabin in the woods, and you're not taking into self what makes you happy.
That's right. Right.
So I think that everybody can learn from each other, and there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I want to be a podcaster, I want to do that. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging if someone's doing a good job, and hey, that's something I think I would enjoy expanding to, and then maybe having a network event or whatever with that person and learning from them. That's not envy. That's not
No.
jealousy.
No.
That's positioning yourself to
Sure.
follow your authentic self.
Sure.
But if that is not the case, if I'm sitting there saying, oh my God, you wouldn't believe this podcaster, blah, 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 blah. You go into this mode of gossip and anger and
Yeah, that's a whole other
all
path. Yeah.
that's a whole nother path.
Yeah,
You're
that's
tearing
right.
down somebody else for something that they're just being their authentic self.
That's exactly what the point I was going to make. Because if they're look, there's nothing wrong with learning from others. Perhaps there's things that you can take that you can build into your own self. But when you're emulating them to be what that person is, and it's not who truly you are, then you're not being your authentic, audacious self, as we talk about here. Is you're actually being just the exact opposite of that, and moving away from the person you're supposed to be.
Right. And who can be better at you than you?
That's it. That's it.
We all are beautiful and loving individuals that deserve the best.
That's right.
But we can't get the best for ourselves if we're not following our true selves.
Yep.
You can look at all the parables in the world. Jonah and the whale. He was told to go. He was told to go one path. He chose another. He ends up getting thrown over the boat and ends up on the beach where he was supposed to go.
Right.
So why are we fighting who we're supposed to be?
That's right. That's right. That's right. Sometimes there's detours, but maybe those detours are where we're supposed to be. Because when we call them detours, perhaps we're thinking, we think they're detours. Maybe that was where we're always the attention we're supposed to go in, and our plan was the detour. Like we don't know that, right?
Right.
We don't know that at all.
And detours sometimes is just life.
That's
life
right.
gets in the way. But are you prepared for life?
Yes.
Have you put in the work to make sure that you have resiliency when life takes a downturn? That could be anything. That could be your finances. That could be your emotions. That could be your pantry. That could be, your gas tank. I mean, it can be anything that you're preparing for the worst that could come. It could, because we never know when. Sometimes you do. They might say your loved one is ill, and this is how long they had. Spend all the time you can't. Those are the blessing ones, because
That's right.
And you can spend that time.
That's right. That's right.
But the ones where
surprises, right?
The surprises, all of a sudden something happens, the global economy takes a downturn. Are you ready?
Yeah.
And it's easy to be ready. It doesn't take hours. It's just saying, okay, this is what I'm going to do today. That's right.
That's right. That's right. Ron, I just love the fact of the way you've sort of taken lessons from your own life and sort of weave them into your well, certainly your book as well. Hold that up for our listeners one more time so they can, our viewers rather, so they can have a look. Crossroads is the name of the book, and you really weave some real life court, criminal, drama all into one fantastic story for readers to walk away with something tangible, which I think is so important. I'm assuming it's available on all platforms where you can get your books.
Yeah, it's on all the major bookstore platforms. You can go into, and if the bookstore doesn't have it in their store, all of them can order it, whether it be a indie bookstore, and I'm not saying indie like Indiana, I'm talking about independent bookstores, Barnes and Noble, BAM, Amazon, great Christmas or holiday gift. It's available also in Indiana and Illinois, and most of the Barnes and Noble, I have signed copies where if someone wants a signed copy there. But any store can get it. And if anybody wants to reach out or follow me, everything's RhondaParkerTaylor.com. Or if it's Facebook, and all of them are Rhonda Parker Taylor. And I'd love to hear from people after, tell me what you thought of the book. But 2, just focus as you do it. As you read the book, focus on what you can learn from this woman's life and this
Yeah.
man's life. There's different characters in it. I told you about the main character, but
Yep.
there's a prosecutor in there that's the main character. There's police officers. There's the one that got in trouble because he was with the person he'd known all his life, and his parents had told him to leave that person alone, and sure enough, he goes at the wrong day, and bam, there's a dead body.
Right.
What
Yep.
kind of decisions are you making for
Yep.
yourself, and what can you learn from that?
Yeah, I'm hearing you loud and clear that there's lessons exist in every
Every-
aspect of our life as long as we're paying attention to it.
That's exactly right. Paying attention is the big part and the hard part, because sometimes
Yeah.
we want to not pay attention.
Understood. Well, I know our viewers and listeners have been paying attention to this conversation, and I really appreciate you, Rhonda, for being here, sharing your insights, your stories, and your writings with the world. And so thank you, and congratulations on all the good stuff.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for having me. And I hope everybody has a beautiful and blessed day.
Thank you. Back we are here on the podcast, and as Rhonda shared with us, life is full of challenges and opportunities. It's important to reflect on our journey, acknowledge our weaknesses, and turn them into strengths. Each detour in life may lead us to where we're truly meant to be. So by paying attention, embracing change, and being true to ourselves, we can live our best audacious lives and make a positive impact on those around us, which is what we're all about. Thank you for tuning in to the Audacious Living Podcast. I hope Rhonda's story has inspired you to embrace your authentic self, face challenges head on, and live your life audaciously. Remember, it's never, ever too late to start your own journey towards living your best life. So stay tuned for more empowering conversations and insights on the Audacious Living Podcast. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.